Everyone always asks me, how deep should I microblade? And the answer isn't a simple one because it really comes with experience. It just depends. So instead, in this video, I'm going to show you 3 simple ways to achieve proper microblading depth. If you're new to my channel, my name is Christy and I'm the owner of Boss Brows. I've been in the beauty industry for almost 9 years now, specializing in microblading. This video is one of many featured in Boss Brows' new online training, The Art of Microblading. This unique, innovative online training was designed to teach all the fundamentals of microblading through videos, lectures, live demos, and photos. I will post the link to the online training in the description below. So the goal of microblading is to implant pigment into the top layers of the dermis. If you go too shallow and you hit the epidermis, the microblading won't stay. If you go too deep, the results can be very ashy and gray, and you could even scar your client. So we're trying to find what I believe Tina Davies coined the sweet spot. The sweet spot is a slight channel in the skin marked by pinpoint bleeding. So how do we get there? How do we know that we're microblading in the correct depth, which is the top layers of the dermis? I'm going to show you 3 different ways to help you achieve that proper depth. The first thing, you want to identify your client's skin thickness. This way you can determine their tolerance and how much pressure to apply when microblading. The client's skin thickness can be categorized into different foods. The first one would be a hard-boiled egg. The hard-boiled egg skin type is super thin and hypersensitive. This skin can appear red and maybe possibly have rosacea. On the Fitzpatrick scale, they'll be between a 1 and a 2. This is the hardest skin type to work on because their skin is so sensitive, they will bleed on contact. So imagine microblading on this skin. The amount of pressure that you would want to use is so light. I feel like I'm literally just slicing right into it. But how do you know if they're the egg? Kind of a funny question, I know. If you're looking at your client's skin, look for invisible pores. They're so tiny that you can barely even see them. Where you're looking is in this area, the forehead area, because this is the area where we'll be microblading. The next skin type is going to be the grape. The grape is thin, but it's not as sensitive. This skin type is fail. The skin type of a grape is a Fitzpatrick scale 1 to 2. Usually ivory skin. They can bleed pretty easily. So imagine what it would be like and how much pressure that you would have to use microblading on a grape. This one would be a little more difficult to do. It's a little bit easier than the egg. It doesn't just slice in there, but I notice I'm still having to use the tiniest amount of pressure. We're looking for really small pores on the grape skin type. Oh, I forgot my apple. The next skin thickness is identified by an apple. The apple would be the ideal skin thickness to work on. This would be very normal skin, average pore size. They're on the Fitzpatrick scale between 2 and 6, so it can really vary. They don't bleed that easily, but they could be sensitive. So you want to look for all of these things. You want to look for average pore size and their Fitzpatrick scale when assessing the skin. Now this one, honestly, when I get a client who comes in with this skin type, it is just so exciting because not only are they so easy to work on, but when you actually make your strokes, that Velcro sound that you're waiting to hear is just so prominent. Imagine microblading on an apple, how crisp it is and easy it is. Kind of like when you take a bite out of an apple, it's just like that crunch. That is the ideal skin thickness that you want to be working on. Then you have the orange. The orange is the thickest skin type. To identify someone as an orange, you want to look again in the forehead area and see what size their pores are. Usually they have really large pores if they're going to be identified as an orange. They can be a Fitzpatrick scale 2 to 6. They could bleed easily or they could not bleed easily. They could be sensitive or not sensitive. This is the thickest skin, and again, you really don't want to work on someone with super thick skin for microblading because the oil in the skin causes our strokes to blur out, so this wouldn't be ideal either. Those are the 4 different skin profiles when we're looking at thickness. But there's also a lurking variable. I had to learn this through experience, years of experience and working on clients. I always profile my client's skin thickness, but then I found a type of skin that I was working on and I couldn't identify it. It seemed to be an orange, but as soon as I went to go make my stroke, it's like my blade just sliced right in. So that's when we identify the skin as a mango. What's really, really hard about this skin thickness or this skin type is there's no way of knowing until you start working on the client. It's really kind of a lurking variable, and I would say the least favorite of mine, because they bleed on contact, but that upper surface is super thick, so it's hard to get through. You don't want to work on a mango. Imagine cutting into a mango. If any of you have ever actually tried slicing a mango, have you, Ashley?
No.
Oh my gosh, a mango is the hardest thing to cut. I prefer to just buy a mango pre-sliced at the store because it's so hard. Hardest to work on because the tolerance of the skin is terrible. Now, when we're figuring out the pressure that we should use, we have this skin profile, and this is going to assess their thickness. The second thing when acquiring perfect microblading depth is your stretch. And in my opinion, this is the most important factor, because it's impossible to get good pigment retention or any pigment retention if you're not holding the skin tight. I'm gonna give you an example. You know when you're shopping and the person helping you hands you a receipt, but your hands are full and you try to go to sign your receipt with one hand. What do? In my experience, I would just ask them for help. Hey, can you lend me your hand so that I can sign my receipt? That is exactly what it's like when you microblade and you're not holding the skin taut. You won't get a good signature. So I'm just gonna show you. Here's a piece of paper. I have a pen. I'm gonna try to do my signature without holding the paper. Yeah, it's an epic fail. Now watch, I'm gonna put my hand down. Let's imagine that that is our 3-point stretch. Boom. I can actually sign this piece of paper when I'm holding it down. Now apply that to microblading. If you're not holding the skin perfectly tight, the pigment won't be able to get in there, therefore you're gonna have poor pigment retention. Most of the time when newbies are microblading, they think that the reason why they're not getting good pigment retention is because they're not going deep enough. So the biggest mistake you could make is going deeper. This could lead to injury or poor results that are ashy and gray. Your stretch should be a 3-point stretch. You want to hold 3 different ways. And my recommendation is whichever direction you're microblading in, that's the direction you want to be holding the skin taut. So let's say I'm making a stroke in the front part of the brow. I am going to hold the skin down and up. Then I'm going to use my pinky to apply a 3-point stretch. Now, when I make my microblading stroke, if I'm applying the right pressure for that skin thickness, I'm gonna end up with perfect results. So stretch is everything. If you're not getting the best pigment retention, hold the skin taut by 1,000. The third thing would be your angle. The angle in which the blade hits the skin needs to be at 90 degrees. Okay, I know this is embarrassing because this banana is kind of gross and all brown. The sound you should hear if you're hitting the skin at 90 degrees. That Velcro sound is music to my ears, because when I hear that, I know that I am hitting the skin at 90 degrees. By adding all of these things together, assessing the skin thickness and knowing the tolerance of your client's skin, applying the 3-point stretch, and hitting the skin at a 90-degree angle, listening for that Velcro sound, you are guaranteed great results. I want to show you the difference in pressure when trying to achieve the perfect depth. The first would be the egg and grape. Now this is super thin skin. So I'm gonna use a piece of paper. I'm gonna grab a pair of scissors and cut into it. Now when I cut into it, I need to hit the paper at 90 degrees. It is super easy for me to cut this paper. Notice how I move my hands? That's because I'm trying to keep a 3-point stretch. If I wasn't holding it and I was trying to just cut it, it would end up really jagged. You know when you're cutting wrapping paper and you start cutting wrapping paper and you get that good, perfect glide and you can just cut it all the way up? That's because you're hitting the wrapping paper at 90 degrees. Then this is probably happened to you if you've wrapped a lot of presents, but then you might notice that it goes and it just gets all jagged, that's because your scissors probably slipped just the tiniest bit and you're no longer hitting that paper at 90 degrees. Well, the same is true for the skin. You need to hit it at 90 degrees. Okay, now let's go to the apple. The apple is a little thicker. I'm just using a piece of construction paper. Same thing, I still need to use my 3-point stretch. I need to hit the paper at 90 degrees, but I have to apply a little more pressure on these scissors in order to cut it. I can't possibly use the same amount of pressure I used on the paper to cut the construction paper. Let's move on to the thickest skin type, which is the orange. So I'm using a piece of cardboard. I could never use the same amount of pressure that I used for the paper on the cardboard and successfully cut it. With this, I'm really having to cut it much harder. So that's just an example of adjusting pressure based on the skin thickness. All of these things combined is going to help you achieve the correct depth. A pro tip that I found to be really useful when microblading is always start off softer or with less pressure than you think you need, because you can always go over your microblading strokes again. But if you go too deep, you can't undo it. I really hope you liked this video and that it helps you achieve perfect microblading depth. If you want to see another video just like this, a way to practice microblading depth at home, then go ahead and check out this video. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button because I come out new videos every Tuesday. Thanks for watching.